Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Alyssa Mathis. I am the Aviation Strategic Account Manager at Convergint, and we are here today to give you a webinar on the aviation worker screening mandate from TSA. With me today, we have Christian Semlaska, also from Convergint, along with Joe Kennedy and Brooke Miller from Smith's Detection and CHEA, respectively. First things first, I'm going to run through the agenda and what you guys can expect to see during our webinar today. We're going to start with aviation security history. Then we'll move on to TSA checkpoints. We'll get into what the purpose of this mandate is and why you should be paying attention to it and what you're going to need to do to accomplish what TSA wants from you. And then we will move into some product partner demonstrations or explanations from CHEA and Smiths. Lastly, we'll talk about some contract vehicles. How can you procure this type of technology to help you? And then we'll go into a Q&A. There is a section for you guys to submit questions. You won't be able to talk with us, so feel free to submit those questions when we get there. I will ask the questions of our guests and be able to get you hopefully the answers you need. And if there's something we can't answer, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the webinar. We'll now roll into some introductions. I will hand it off to Chris to start.
Thank you, Alyssa. Hello, everyone. Just a quick intro from me. I've spent nearly 40 years of my work life living in the airport and aviation world. At this point in my career, it's been pretty evenly divided between time spent in leadership roles in the airline operations area and time spent in airport operations and security. One highlight I'd like to share with you, though, pertinent to today's presentation. While working in a senior leadership role at a large hub airport, approximately about 7 years ago, I was tasked with implementing a full employee screening program, which was being supported not necessarily by TSA, but by a major airline as a result of security issues involving the illegal transport of firearms using badged employees to do that. Without mentioning the airline, I worked together with my counterparts at LAX and Minneapolis and Atlanta and Detroit to install full employee screening program, which also included reducing access points and then mandating the employee screening program once it was implemented. One thing to mention, as many of you, I'm sure, are aware through this process that you've just been involved in, it's not just about hand wands and bag searches on employees or procuring and installing equipment. Some of the tougher work really comes from creating the policies and from working with union groups and establishing the exceptions for emergency workers, for example. At any rate, I'll say the implementation did result in routinely finding prohibited items on employees, including weapons. Now, at this point in my career, I am absolutely thrilled to be at Convergint for the past 4 years, and I'm extremely proud to be part of the aviation vertical team here, building support for airports and airlines as a security technology integrator. And working with some truly innovative partners like Smith's Detection and CHEA. With that, I'll pass it to Brooke.
Very good. Good afternoon. My name is Brooke Miller. I've been with CHEA now for about 10 years. I'm sitting in an airport lobby, so if you hear familiar announcements, I apologize for that in advance. Prior to that, I was working with Smith's Detection for about 11 years, and prior to that with Behringer Instruments, which is the sort of the predecessor, original company that turned into Smith's Detection. So I've been working with FAA and developed into TSA for 25 some odd years on the technology side through those companies, and have always been responsible and very close with the federal government space, but in particular TSA activities, both from airlines to airports and certainly the federal agency itself. So I'm glad to be here this afternoon, and I'll look forward to any questions later on. Thanks.
All right, and I'm Joe Kennedy. Not quite the 20 to 40 years of experience in the industry as my two counterparts here, but I've been with Smiths Detection for about 4 years, and I'm our key account manager in the aviation industry. So I head up our TSA account, and then I handle all things with airports, airlines, and then air cargo stuff as well. So it's been awesome to work with Alyssa up to this point and learn a lot from the team here at Convergint. And Brooke, I think we've even had some communications over the last couple of months. So excited to be here and look forward to any questions once we get through.
Thanks, team. And then Christian, I'll hand it off to you to start the presentation.
I think Chris is on mute.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Hello again, everyone, and welcome again. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to spend a few minutes with us while we discuss some of the ways Convergint and our technology partners can support you in meeting compliance with this national amendment for aviation worker screening. We're thrilled to have attendees on this call with a wide and varied background and roles on the call. And because of that, I wanted to take a few minutes to just briefly look back at aviation security in general and connect some of the historical dots that got us to this point today. So the world of aviation security from the perspective of looking at the agencies who are charged with oversight and ultimately making decisions about mitigating risk and building assurances around what keeps us safe and secure has always been much more reactive than proactive in their approach. And I think if you've been to any conference that involved TSA, you've probably heard that in the past. This national amendment we're discussing today, while its implementation may be a tough pill for some to swallow, it's probably, and I'm going out on a bit of a limb, my opinion only, one of the most proactive requirements published for addressing aviation security issues. Before we get into what we can do to help, I think it's important to consider a few historical points in the evolution of aviation security as it pertains to screening passengers and baggage in commercial airports, and ultimately the employees that service the aircraft and work in airports. The focus historically, as I say, has been primarily on external threats. That includes passengers and even shippers utilizing airports and airlines and aircraft. That's not to say focus on internal risk has been ignored, but historically the primary and most notable threats have been external. And I've listed just a few here to consider as we're talking through this. I think in the 1950s and early 1960s, bomb threats and hijackings were really the tone of the day. These were addressed through kind of a minimal effort, bringing on armed security guards. They were not called sky marshals at the time, and I think that's probably one of the first real focused attempted remedies with regard to resolving aviation security issues. One of the most notable, and some of you may know this and are very familiar with it, but D.B. Cooper, hopped on an airplane and said he had a bomb, and the airplane was flying from Portland to Seattle. Once it landed in Seattle, he had demanded $200,000. He released the passengers, took the crew. He also wanted a parachute, and took off for Mexico. And 30 minutes out of Seattle, lowered the back aircraft stairs on the 727 and used his parachute and jumped out. A little bit of the money was found, but no one ever ever saw anything of the parachute or D.B. Cooper again. That was in 1971, which kind of propelled us into 1973, where the FAA mandated X-ray and metal detectors in airports. That was kind of the biggest piece that moved forward for airport security. During that point, 4 years after that was mandated, there was only one successful hijacking. So it definitely had an impact. Through the years, many other measures have been put in place, things such as CAPS, which I'm sure many are familiar with, pre-screening and the selectee and no-fly systems that TSA implemented, or FAA and then TSA. Checked baggage was screening was put in place as a result of ultimately from enhanced screening from 9/11. AITs came into play in the roughly 2009. And as a result of the influx in the passenger screening lines in 2013, TSA developed the pre-check, and today more than 15 million active members participate in the pre-check as a way to mitigate some of that congestion at checkpoints. It's also important to note that after 9/11, the regulatory oversight for airport security moved from the FAA to TSA under the Department of Homeland Security. That was about 6 weeks, a little longer, maybe 2 months after 9/11 occurred. So that was a very quick response. On these points, I don't want to get too deep into these, but just a few reminders of some key topics. Our real focus right now is on the employee screening and insider threat mitigation. But these events really led to some of the development of how TSA has issued the national amendment we're talking about today. For lack of a better term, these landmark incidents have culminated in tweaks in the aviation security program that we know today through security directives and ASP amendments. The first on the list is the shoe bomber, concealed explosives in the sole of his shoe, resulting in everyone having to remove their shoes for a long period of time. And now through the pre-check program, there are exemptions for that, but that's the event that caused that to happen. Our restrictions on liquids, aerosols, and gels, a result of an event that was thwarted by the British Metro Police in 2006 to bring explosives in water bottles onto aircraft. The next one is the underwear bomber from Northwest Airlines traveling into Detroit. The device did ignite, but it failed to detonate, and they believe that's probably because he wore those same underwear for 2 weeks as he was planning this event, and it degraded the effectiveness of the explosives. It did kind of lead to that AIT deployment at aircraft or in airports, and definitely brought that to the forefront. And the final one is the printer cartridges. For those of you that remember that, there were commercial flights out of the Middle East into Europe where they then planned to transport the printer cartridges with explosives in them to UPS flights, to cargo flights traveling into the U.S., specifically into Chicago. This is where we came up with where TSA mandated the known shipper and cargo screening mandates. This is just a quick reality check on what happens at security checkpoints and why they are so vital and effective. Just a couple of things that are found. This was all in 2023, last year. I still have a hard time understanding. I think the main excuse is I forgot it was in my bag. I have a hard time understanding that, but I guess thank goodness that we have TSA finding these items at the airports through the screening checkpoints. I think for this, it really is the first 3 bullet points are just a reminder that there's great buy-in into this new aviation screening, worker screening mandate, and that it's supported in general as a remedy to the next step of ensuring the safe and secure operations of aviation in airports. The last bullet point is probably the most important right now for this presentation. From my time working on the other side of the equation in a leadership role in aviation security, I'm going to share just a couple of incidents that highlight the importance of mitigating the risk of insider threat. And the first one is an individual at an airport a badged employee actually inserted pieces of a disassembled pistol into his rectum and proceeded into the sterile area of an airport, where he was actually able to get through. Without going into details on this, it was discovered, and he was not successful in utilizing that weapon. However, he did get it into the sterile area of the airport for a brief period of time. And the second incident I'll note is more recent Horizon Airlines ground employee who stole a Dash 8 aircraft and took off and eventually crashed that aircraft into a remote island in Puget Sound. And the point of these two items is, well, screening may not have done much to mitigate either of these. It's just really important to realize that the threat is real, and these were badged employees. It's vital to consider this, because the incidents did involve badged employees, and they had access to restricted areas of the airport. So most airports have started some level of employee screening to meet the requirements of this national amendment. Some may not have fully started through working with their local FSD to establish agreements to meet compliance on an extended schedule. Most importantly for this conversation, however, is that Convergint and our technology partners have already been assisting airports in the procurement of the equipment and tools that help to meet the requirements of this amendment, and in a way that it also, we're cognizant of what best serves the airport operational restrictions and the requirements, as well as the budgetary constraints that airports face around these issues of deploying this type of equipment. And on the screen, also, it goes without saying that it's important to note that the date will be coming quickly around explosive detection screening equipment mandates. And so that's why the timeliness of this call right now, so that we can help with that piece of planning what will work best in your airport and how to get it deployed as quickly as possible. I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. I just wanted to mention that as a potential business partner in supporting airports through your implementation of this national amendment, we are fully aware of the requirements and tools that you have, and we're here from a technology partner perspective to help reduce the operational impacts that you may have from complying with this amendment. Again, just quickly outlining from the requirements as described by the TSA rollout guidance. Sorry, I'm on the wrong screen. There you go. I think that the items highlighted in red are really where Convergint, together with our technology partners, that we're here to support you. And these are items that we can definitely, if you reach out, we can definitely assist you with. I don't know that we'll do much for postage signing at your access doors, but I think the others that are highlighted in red are things that we can definitely assist you with. In closing, well, the first part of what I talked about with you highlighted the aviation and security world in general, and more specifically, security issues involving people other than employees. I hope, especially for those of you on the webinar who may not live in the day-to-day world of aviation security specifically, it helps to demonstrate this national amendment, which, by the way, has been years in the making, is a critical step in further protecting the aviation infrastructure, airlines, and their passengers. And with that, I will pass it to Brooke.
Thank you, Chris. And again, my name is Brooke Miller with CHEA Metal Detectors, and we're very pleased to be able to participate in this brief here today. So my observations on this new ruling, if you will, were that I was surprised that it took so long to arrive at a consensus and a mandate to start doing something more than what has been done in the past. And I was also struck by the vagueness, if you will, of what the real criteria is. And so for the past 18 months or more, I've been talking with dozens of airports who have reached out to me, and we've spoken with Convergint many times about this, as to what is a reasonable, smart solution and the like. And our view is to basically stick with what you know. The airport community is very familiar with the technologies that have been through the system over the past 2 decades or so. And when I first came into this business, as an aside, I remarked that that for most access control, including FAA and TSA activities, it has been historically metal detection, conventional X-ray systems, trace detection, and the like. And 20 some odd years later, and I don't know how many billions of dollars spent, it remains metal detection, X-ray systems of some form, trace detection, and now AIT. And there are new things coming down the line, but it by and large has remained the same. And so my counsel to many of the airport operators has been to stick with what you know. It is a comparatively low cost, familiar to both operators and to folks going through the system. And it does what it needs to do. The other aspect that I was struck with was the security settings, is what we call them, and the level of security detection, performance, and the like is sort of unestablished. I would think that over time, sooner than later, I would guess that the TSA and the various authorities looking at this and doing more surveys and work on it may well start to impose more stringent or possibly confined types of security standards that are that may be available. There's been a lot of conversations, and there's a lot of new products that are very interesting that don't meet or don't even come close to the security settings that much less TSA, but other federal and even public areas conduct. So those have been my 2 points of counsel. Don't fret this too much. Look at all the available options, and there are quite a number of them, and go with what you know and are comfortable with. And every airport has its own constraints in regard to mobility and traffic flows and the like. But these the current kind of technologies are readily available and fit the bill and can be modified easily to adjust towards future standards if they come down the pike. So that's all I can add to the conversation from a vendor standpoint. We're always more than willing to talk with folks about our experiences in this regard, and with Convergint certainly. And at that, unless there are any immediate questions, I'll leave it up to Joe. Thank you.
Hey, Brooke, really quick, just before we pass off to Joe, could you talk to the, I guess, how CHEA has certain certifications by the federal government and why that would be important for the airports to take a look at?
So, sure. CHEA has supplied for many years certified walk-through metal detectors and BLS, bottle liquid scanner systems. And they've been certified many years ago. The certification process has changed fairly little over those years. And so we're very familiar with those standards and the like. Same kinds of things apply to CT machines and AIT and the like. But we're very familiar with it. Those kinds of standards have not been written into or imposed by this current regulation. And so, again, as I said earlier, they may, or something approaching it. And so I think it would give some airport operators some comfort to understand where in that range of certification criteria their technology choices may lay, because again, they may impose in the coming months, years, something more closely approaching a checkpoint type of operation, or even a federal access control operation. But right now, they're not there.
Just run through real quick agenda. I'm gonna talk about a brief introduction to Smith's detection, talk a little bit about what you should be considering when looking at technology and ConOps. I know Christian and Brooke did a really good job talking through some of this already, but just going to add a little bit based on some discussions that I've been having. And then going to get into technology options for actually performing employee screening. Going to be a quick kind of broad overview of the main things to consider when selecting different screening technology and some key differences between different model X-rays, using trace units. And obviously I work for Smiths Detection, so my focus is going to be mainly on our equipment. And my completely unbiased opinion, the best technology available on the market. No, just kidding. But in all seriousness, I'm gonna, each airport is gonna have to handle this in a different way, in a way that makes the most sense for that airport. So I'm gonna try to speak a little bit more broadly about the technology in general and some of the differences to be considering to understand what may be a best fit for you. So I'll compare some different X-ray models, talk about some software add-ons for those X-ray models, some specifics about ETDs, and then talk about networking, some purchasing decisions, and then answer any questions. All right, so a little bit about Smiths Detection, our mission, making the world a safer place. This is our goal. This is why, why we make the technologies that we make, protect people and infrastructure, and specifically for this market, making sure that we are keeping dangerous things off planes, right? So I know this means a lot to me and a lot to Smiths, so I do enjoy working for a company and working with stakeholders like you to accomplish this mission. So just a quick look at our global presence here. We are a global company in the US. We're headquartered in Edgewood, Maryland. That's where we manufacture everything. And more importantly, looking at our US footprint. So we have service technicians throughout the country and forward stocking locations throughout the country, mostly based at airports to support our fleet of technology. So moving on to some considerations about the technology and some of the ConOps when you're looking at setting up an employee screening program. So this is what you're all thinking through in regards to starting up this program at your airport. I'm sure there are way more considerations than I've listed here, so I'm still learning all that as I talk to you. But from my perspective on the technology side, these are some of the main pieces. So we have the access points and the footprint. So the number of access points to consider, the space at each location, the timing for screening, and then the required throughput, whether you're going to have a lot of people or just a few people going through there. We have the workforce, so the number of screeners, whether it's airport labor or contract labor, and then the main consideration there is how you're training people, right? And then the screening requirements. So whether you need an ETD capability, the tunnel size to consider when you're looking at X-rays, if it would make sense to have like an operator assist function, and then whether you're screening goods, people, or both. I know mainly we're talking about employee screening here, but in a lot of conversations I've been having, we've been discussing screening actual goods going into the sterile area as well, like concessions and things like that. And then obviously for all of you, you want to be considering the budget. So whether it's CapEx versus operating budget, and I will talk a little bit about recapping for the TSA because that has been coming up recently, and then looking at a training budget. So starting to look at some security technology, we have our bigger X-rays, which are cargo X-rays, probably not applicable here unless, like I said, you are looking at screening goods. We differentiate that from our passenger X-rays. So those are smaller, multiple different models, but those are probably going to be the more common selection if you're looking at actual X-ray technology for this. And then we have walkthrough systems, which Chea just talked about. We don't actually manufacture those, but that's going to be a big one for employee screening. And then we have the explosive trace detector. So our model is down there on the left. I'll get into it in a little bit more detail in just a minute, but that's the IonScan 600. And then the last two things that I mentioned in the agenda, adding some algorithms that help the employees actually identify threats and then potential networking. So the first step getting into the X-ray imaging technology, the main consideration I would say is the size and the numbers of views you get. So these are the four main units to consider. You have single view units, you have dual view units, you have multi-view units, and then you have CTICs, CT units, which are 3D image, and that's what's being rolled out now to TSA checkpoints. The multi-view is what have been in TSA checkpoints and are still in some checkpoints as they get replaced with CT. The single view, obviously the smallest, you get one one view. It's the most basic, but typically the smallest footprint. And then the dual view is a step up. You're getting two views, and I'll talk about what that means in a little bit more detail in just a second. The next major consideration when you're looking at x-rays is the tunnel size, right? So I know how we label our x-rays is the tunnel size or the numbers that we label them with. So 5030 is 19.5 inches by 12 inches. We're a UK company, so we're using 5030. It's millimeters. But that's on the left. That's for typically parcels and small bags. And then you move up a step to 6040. That's kind of more of a standard passenger checkpoint tunnel size. And then beyond that, you're getting into if you need to be screening stuff larger than typical passenger items like bags, work toolboxes, things like that. So just to talk a little bit about the difference between dual view and single view, and why that's so important in regards to this kind of screening. So you can see here this X-ray on the left, you have a dual view X-ray. So that basically means the generator is on the bottom here, so you're getting a bottom up view, and then on the left, so you're getting a side view as well. So to really kind of understand the main difference there, why that means so much is if you look at the threat here in this image, you can see from this bottom up view, there's a threat right here, and I'm pointing it out. But you can see some from the side view what it actually is, right? So if you're looking at a single view X-ray and you're having just a bottom up view, there's a strong chance that you're going to miss something like that. And then when you get the second view to see the image from the other side, you see a very obvious threat in that picture, right? So with the single view units, a lot of times you're repositioning bags to rerun them. If they're too cluttered and you don't think you have a good picture, it's slowing down the checkpoints, creating frustrations, and there's a stronger chance you're missing images. But obviously, you still get a good X-ray image. It's smaller, it's less expensive, so it is definitely still an option. But this right here is one of the main reasons that if we are considering X-rays for any kind of screening, employee screening, but really any kind of screening, we are suggesting dual view over the single view X-rays. And a couple other reasons for that are, which I'll get into in just a second, are the actual algorithms that go on it are just much more powerful when you have dual view or multi-view. So just to mention the other two, multi-view is what we call our ATIX unit. That's what used to be in a lot of checkpoints and still persists until they get all replaced by CTs. Similar to dual view, except you have 4 generators. So it's like an advanced dual view capability. You're getting 4 images instead of just the 2. And then the CT, which is now being rolled out to checkpoints, you actually get a 3D image. So if I had a live CT image, I would show you, you can actually spin that around and look at the items from all angles. The reason we don't recommend CT for employee screening is it's probably a little bit of overkill. They're massive machines, so the space doesn't make a ton of sense, and they are by far the most expensive machines. The reason I'm mentioning the multi-view here, the ATIX, because there is an option to get those actually from TSA. So I'll talk about that a little bit at the end, but that might make sense on the budget side for some airports. So now just talking about some of the algorithms that we can add on. And the reason that we've been seeing some airports adopt this for employee screening, one of the main reasons is the training of employees, right? So a lot of airports are looking at contract labor to run x-rays. It's not always going to be like trained TSA operators that have, a lot of experience running x-rays. Hopefully they have some experience, but these operator assist algorithms really help not miss threats. So ours is branded iSeymour. I know competitor x-rays make similar things, right? Where you can see algorithms that call out dangerous goods. Ours is branded iSeymour. You can see it's actually finding gun parts, ammo, full guns, and it's putting a blinking box around them. So when the operator is actually running the x-ray, you're getting notified like, hey, this looks like a threat. And they are very, very accurate. You can see in some of these pictures where you really can barely even see that it would be ammo. It's actually calling that out as gun parts. So when you have, high turnover or maybe less trained operators, this is very, very beneficial. The other one is the automatic explosives detection. And this is beneficial because it helps you meet that TSA requirement to have some kind of explosive detection capabilities if you wanted to use X-ray instead of an ETD. All right, so now just getting into the trace detection. One of the biggest benefits here, you can see it's a small machine, is its mobility. So I know this is a challenge screening multiple employee checkpoints, multiple entrances for employees. So the IonScan 600 is our trace detector. You can see the handle on the top of it. You can pick this up. It's battery powered, or you can plug it in. It charges while it's plugged in, and you can move it around to different entrances. So it really gives you that mobility and gives you the explosive detection capability that you need. So these machines are extremely easy to use. So again, on the training piece, it doesn't take a ton of training for basic operation. They require minimum maintenance, and they're fast. So if you need, budget friendly, small, and portable, this is the route that a lot of airports are going. A lot of smaller airports without the footprint to include an X-ray, an ETD is a really good option. Also, in addition, with like the walkthrough that Brooke was talking about from CHEA before, if you have the walkthrough metal detector, you're screening the person. You have the ETD to screen any belongings, or also swab the person if that's the ConOps that you're adopting. It's a really beneficial combination. Last thing I'll talk about is networking. I think this is a future state as this continues to grow. If you have multiple employee checkpoints and you want to be able to operate these from a central location, we do provide capabilities to kind of network X-rays, ETDs, and even walkthroughs together, so you can get one picture of your employee checkpoints if you have multiple, and then you're reducing the highly trained labor that you need to actually be operating these units, because you can have a centralized screening location and then less labor at the actual locations where you're doing screening. So the last thing that I want to mention is on the budget side, just some things that you're probably considering. Again, I know you all are probably considering a lot more than what I have here, but just some things that we've been having discussions about. For purchasing new equipment, you have options for any unit that you want. I mentioned TSA is actually recapping equipment. So the AT, which is the multi-view units that are coming out of TSA checkpoints, they are offering those potentially for employee screening. So that's something I would encourage you to speak to your local TSA contact about. And the difference there is obviously it reduces the CapEx budget. What I've heard is you just need to pay for rigging and getting it to your location, and then you got to pay for install. The problem there is it's a limited selection, right? So if these larger units don't fit with your location, then it's not going to make sense for you. And then the operating budget is inevitably a little bit larger because the maintenance is more expensive because they are older units. On the new equipment purchase, you have options for pretty much any unit that would make sense for you. All the covered under warranty, all the service options. You can do kind of a phased acquisition if you're planning on growing your employee screening footprint. And then the last thing that I want to mention that Brooke started to mention as well is considering if it's gone through some kind of TSA qualification process. A lot of our units are on what's called the ACSTL, the Air Cargo Screening Technology List, which is a TSA list. That means they've been qualified by TSA. So that's something definitely to consider when you're purchasing. It's not a requirement now, but if it becomes a requirement in the future, there's a strong possibility that that list could be used to purchase off because it is a TSA list. So I have that linked here. I'm not sure if Alyssa is sharing the presentation, but it's linked at the bottom here. You can also just Google TSA ACSTL and the most recent one will pop up. So just quick review, multiple screening technology options. For X-ray, you're considering your footprint, the tunnel size you want, whether you want dual view, single view, multi-view, training requirements in any software. And for ETD, you're considering really just training and the ConOps that you'd want to use for that trace detector, future capability with networking if you're growing your program, and then looking at purchasing considerations. So that is all I have. If anyone wants to hear more or get more detail about our products, I'm happy to talk. So I will stop sharing and pass it back to you, Alyssa.
Thanks, Joe. That was fantastic. I do have one quick question just while we're still kind of on your stuff, so that before we move on, that I kind of thought of while you were talking. But, what does the manufacturing lead times look like for some of your products, just so that our airports that are listening in can think about, the timeline that they have to comply with if they choose to move forward with some of these systems?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. It varies, right? So it's going to vary depending on the product that you want. It varies if you want to if you can use refurbished products. We have some in stock, right? So it's really going to depend on what unit you want to get. I would say safe lead times to be considering are between 4 and 6 months. for X-ray units and similar for trace units. So that would be a good buffer to give yourself if you're trying to meet a timeline. And then if you're talking to TSA about the multi-view units, that there is potential for recapitalization and getting those units from TSA. I'm not sure what their lead time is for those, but if that's something you want to explore, then I would, like I said, approach your local TSA rep and they can probably talk more about it.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe.
Yep, no problem.
Great. And so now that we've kind of gone through that, I just want to bring up one other thing before we jump into the Q&A session, cooperative purchasing. So some of our airports may have heard of this, and if you haven't, your purchasing team probably has. Most airports I've ever talked to will at Convergint with our partners or just on our own have access to at least one of these three options on the right here. So what is cooperative purchasing? We call them contract vehicles just for short, or CVs. And basically this is a pre-competed bid system where Convergint has competed to these groups to be listed as a reseller of different equipment and our labor on their contracts. So you can use these contracts to supplement the bid process. The reason I bring this up is obviously there's a pretty short timeline, especially with the lead times to consider for certain equipment to get these systems in place so that you can comply with TSA's mandate. And so this is a great way to be able to supplement your bid process, move quicker, more effectively, and things like CHEA's metal detectors are already listed on some of our contracts like Sourcewell. And so you can go and you can see what that's going to look like from a cost perspective. The other big one at the bottom would be NASPO. NASPO would be what we would use with Smith's detection. And so that is an easy way. If you go look up the NASPO contract, definitely we are certified in multiple states already, and we keep moving forward with that. But you are able to use that to also procure equipment and labor from Convergint as well. So this is a great way for you guys to be able to procure that equipment in a quick manner if necessary. It's already pre-competed, supplements that bid process. We see different airports and even municipalities and things like that use this all the time in the world we are in. So just a great option from that perspective. And with that being said, we'll move on to the Q&A. And we do have one question sitting in there already, but there is a button for you guys to hit where you can enter questions if you have any. So feel free to add some in, but I will start by asking this one. And Christian or Joe or Brooke, if you guys have any insight, just feel free to unmute, speak up. So the first question we have here, it says, can one remote screening room have TSA agents looking at passengers and employees in the same room? Christian, I feel like you might be best to help with this, but Joe, if you have any insights as well.
Christian, go ahead.
Will you do the question one more time?
Yeah, of course. Can one remote screening room have TSA agents looking at passengers and employees in the same room?
I suppose it's possible. I think that, the way that this is set up is in most airports, TSA is not going to be doing this type of screening. It's going to be an airport authority or a contractor of an airport authority that will be doing the employee screening. I'm sure it's possible if you work it out with an FSD that from the practical standpoint, not from the operational or technical standpoint, that would probably be the bigger challenge. From a technical standpoint, I'm sure that the technology can cover that. But I think the bigger issue is that as this is laid out right now, it really is on the airport authority to be handling that screening piece and not TSA. And with that, if you have any other insight, Joe, please feel free.
Yeah, I'd say you're almost definitely right there. I say technically probably capable, right? But TSA is not going to provide screening for the employees. And that they're using the remote screening rooms, which are kind of few and far between still. That's still being rolled out to airports. They're using those for the checkpoints, for the passenger checkpoints. So I would be really surprised if it was allowed to have non-TSA workers in their screening employee checkpoints. So my guess would be that there would need to be a central location that the airport owned and operated to do a centralized screening of employee checkpoints.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Hopefully that answered your question. We do have another question in here. The question is, who trains the airport staff or airport contractor to utilize the equipment to a TSA compliance level? Joe, do you want to start with that one and then we can add in?
So
Okay.
for us on any of our equipment, we would provide training so that you are a certified operator of our equipment. I don't know that you necessarily would have to say to meet whatever TSA's standard is for their employees. I think you would just need to have certified SMIS training to say you're a certified operator. The other thing that we do is we do train the trainer classes. So if you wanted to get actual local, like your own employees trained to be certified in order to provide training on our technology, you can do that, which also is a good kind of consideration if you're thinking about the different employees or training new employees coming on that are going to be operating checkpoints. So those are both options, and I think that would be sufficient for operating our equipment at your employee checkpoints.
It's Brooke. That's an interesting question, but I'd be cautious about conflating the ESA operations with the airport operation.
Yep.
And as does Smith, CHEA, we provide training on maintenance and use and operation all the time. And that has been the case with a lot of airport operations that we've provided equipment to. But I would think that TSA would not join the two things. I think they're two very separate, distinct operations.
Thanks, Brooke.
Yeah, I think
ahead,
that I just want to really quick bring up the fact that these guys, they're completely right on what they're talking about. I think, TSA is going to be the regulatory oversight for this. They are not going to help in developing policy. You have the technical piece, which our partners can assist with, the technology folks can assist with in developing that training. I think that your internal policy is going to come from the airport authority, looking at the hours that you and your federal security directors come up with that are required for you to be doing the screening, and then what you're actually looking for and how you're running people through. It will look different from airport to airport, and that's based on policy, things like footprint and throughput. How you're able to move people from one end of your airport to the other and doing it in the most efficient way are all going to be part of your policy that needs to be trained for the folks that are going to be running your equipment in your security checkpoint areas for employees.
Yeah, and to follow up with that question, which I think, Brooke, this will be for you mainly, the airport that's asking this says they plan on funneling employees through one entry, which will likely be a tunnel. Is there an open space requirement for the metal detector?
So with metal detectors, good question. Unfortunately, my answer is it depends. Metal detectors, like most other gear, are subject to either mechanical or electronic interferences. And there is a width amount that is required. ADA is typical, or even a little bit less than that. So it depends, but by and large, should not be a problem. We put our metal detectors, which are electronically immune to an awful lot of the interference problems that we see in the field. We put them in the darndest places, and we get them to operate quietly and properly and so forth. So generally, it's not an issue, but in some circumstances it may be.
Awesome. Thanks, Brooke. Another question added in here as well. Does TSA offer funding for this equipment? I'm going to say probably not. But Joe, you were talking about how they were potentially giving out refurbished ones. Maybe you have a little more insight into that than I would, but my guess is that no, they're not planning to offer money for people to put this into place.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, and I think that's part of the frustration for a lot of airports. But they are
Yeah,
offering
absolutely.
in some instances. I've been having conversations with some airports that are talking with TSA about getting. They're essentially old checkpoint units. So when TSA is deploying the new CPSS, which are the CT units into checkpoints, they're pulling out the old units, and they are offering those to airports. And that it's not free. You're still gonna, as far as I understand, you're gonna have to pay for rigging and shipping, and then you'll have to pay for install. And basically, for us, you have to pay for us to come out and make sure everything's working properly. If anything's not working properly, we fix it, and then you bring it under maintenance. So it's not free, but the capital expenditure is definitely less than buying a brand new unit.
Right. It's Brooke. If I could chip in, yeah, this is a unfunded mandate and has been causing some anxiety, to say the least. But I'm with Joe. There are some opportunities in some airports where TSA has either excess or older equipment that they're looking to replace, and there may be opportunities there.
Thanks, guys. And Joe, just to kind of follow up with that for, I guess, for both of you, Joe and Brooke, someone else had asked what warranty the recapped equipment from TSA comes with. I guess that would depend on if there's any warranty left on the equipment at this point.
I don't think, at least from our perspective, for our units, it's not coming with a warranty. You actually have to get it evaluated and then brought back under warranty. So the warranty for those units, at least for us, and I can be specific if anyone wants to have additional conversations, but the warranty is more expensive for those units because they are older units. So that's the trade-off. It's less of a capital expenditure, but the year-over-year operating cost is a little bit more than if you're buying a new unit.
Of course.
The case with Jay equipment often. TSA is renowned for being a little rough on equipment, so we'd have to take a look at it before considering that kind of stuff.
Okay, and I think he said there, just because there was some background noise, that if same for Chea, if they would have to take a look at the equipment and evaluate if there was an option for that, if it's not new equipment. We do have another question in here. Awesome, thanks, Brooke. Does each employee screening area require CT scanner, X-ray, roller belts, AITs, metal detectors, and everything else associated with a passenger screening lane? If so, how many lanes would be recommended if there is a recommendation? And I can kind of start this off. So, TSA's mandate isn't really requiring any technology. You could do hand wands and bag searches. I think the only place where you might run into actually needing the technology would be the explosive trace detection aspect of this. However, obviously, hand wands and bag searches, that's a lot of time. So your throughput would be lower and, there'd be more mistakes from that perspective as well, or things missed. Plus, you are then having to pay enough people to be there and to actually be searching people and bags from that perspective. But Christian, you could probably talk to this a little bit more than I can. But I would say that that's kind of the first answer to that question.
Yeah, you're right. You're right on the mark. And I think the thing to consider is, in busier airports, and it doesn't necessarily mean larger airports, in airports that maybe have high seasonal volumes of passenger traffic, where you're bringing in more employees who have to get to work in a quicker manner, and that's seasonal. It may work to your benefit to have a more quote unquote TSA type checkpoint where you have a walk-through metal detector and baggage screening device, so that you can get people through quicker. I've seen issues with some airports right now who have implemented the more manual way of doing business with hand wands and manual bag checks, physical bag checks, where it's taking quite a bit of time to get employees through, and that is causing some issues. And I think one of the other things to consider when you're doing that, it is subject to not only training, but people's perception of what the training means. And so I've seen issues in airports recently where, the screeners that are hired to do this are actually going through people's personal items to a level that is not really what they should be doing. And that gets removed when you're using, to the most extent, when you're using equipment to do it rather than people and their more subjective way of doing business. So I think that the benefits of looking, if it's in your budget in the future to look at equipment to do it, there certainly are positive reasons for doing that.
Absolutely. And I would say then to the second part of that question on the how many lanes would be recommended, I think this is really, really dependent on each individual airport and your throughput and your busy times and things of that nature. So I feel like that's a really big discussion that we can't really answer on this call very easily, just because it's so dependent on the airport. We do have one other question in here, and this will probably be the last one we can take on this call since we have about a minute left. So we'll make sure we answered this one. And then if you have any others in the chat, I have entered my email address so that if you have another question that we didn't have time to get to, please feel free to email me and we'll consult and get you an answer in writing back as well. So the last question that we have in here for right now: have we heard anything regarding the use of TSA certified canines being able to perform as the ETD component of aviation worker screening? Christian or Joe, I personally haven't heard anything on that at this point, but my guess is that since TSA is trying to have the airport do this screening and they don't really want to be involved in the screening, right? They're going to check your plans and things of that nature, but they are trying to push this screening off to the airport. My guess would be that, maybe your FSC, if you had conversations with them, this could be an option, but my guess is that they would want you to have your own way of screening from that perspective.
Yeah, it's highly doubtful that TSA would do that. A handful of airports have actually brought their own canine units on and utilize them for this sort of screening of employees and in the employee areas. So that is something to consider. But I'd highly doubt that TSA would be amenable to sharing their resources on that.
He did clarify these would be dogs owned by the airport, not TSA.
So that's a possibility. In that case, that is a possibility.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining today, and great questions. Thank you for engaging with us. This has been recorded, so this will also be posted to our website. And if you have any other questions, like I said, I have posted my email address in the chat, and you can feel free to email me at any time, and we will make sure we get back to you on that. Thank you, everyone, so much, and have a great rest of your week.